Hey everyone, I hope you're all having a fantastic day so far. Today, I want to talk about not putting yourself in a position where you're charging low rates. This is a big one because there are a lot of contractors out there who maybe have started contracting for the first time or potentially have been doing this rodeo for a long time, and they just get any contract that they see and they get a really low rate. Okay. Now, what's determined as low in this instance? If you have done this job before, let's say in a permanent 9 to 5, and you weren't working for some magic circle company or some really big organization, and you were getting charged X, if that day rate translates into that annual amount, when you add up all of the weeks, the days, the months, and all that kind of stuff there, pro rata, should I say, then that's too low. What is the point? I want to come to really talk about the problems associated with that so you can get a better understanding, okay? Now, the reason why people sort of like go with low rates is typically because there's a sense of desperation, which is understandable during this time. There are a lot of people who need work. And of course, look, there are caveats to all of this stuff. So you have to know your market, you have to know your positioning, you have to know if you are in a position where you can get more contracts. And there are niches that have that ability to get more contracts or who are getting loads of offers or whatever it may be. So, for example, this may be people within the digital space. This may be people within the healthcare space. This may be people within the project space in certain projects, okay? Certain transformation project space. It may not be as regular, but they are getting callbacks, especially during this time between January to like April, maybe May. There is a higher than usual sort of like contract callback rate, so to speak, in terms of recruiters or agents or hiring managers or the economic buyer looking for individuals to deliver work, whether this is inside or outside of IR35. So there is a sense of lack or desperation in that way. Okay, in some instances, understandable, but it's dependent upon your market. So be clear about your market. I'm not going to get into that because you can watch other videos where I talk about that stuff more deeply. Now, the second thing is there is a lack of confidence. People don't believe they can get a higher rate. And they get irate when they see that there are other consultants or contractors that get a higher rate. How do they know this? Maybe they're working on systems where they may potentially see a certain rate. Maybe they get sort of like brought into emails which reveal a certain rate. Maybe they get into conversations with other individuals where they get a higher rate. Maybe they're speaking to their friends or other contractor or consultant colleagues who are getting higher rates. And in your mind, you may be thinking, oh my gosh, like, why didn't I command more? Because you didn't know how to control the conversation with the recruiter. Or you were scared that, or you weren't willing to let that contract go if it didn't demand a certain rate. Now, I'm not saying do anything ridiculous, okay? So I'm going to give you a hypothetical example. Let's say, for example, as a project manager, you typically get anywhere between 400 and 600 pounds a day, okay? And I would say this is probably a good example because this is typically what some project managers may get. And you come into, let's say, a public sector organization and they're lowballing it at £300 a day. Now you're thinking, oh, the economy's bad and all this kind of stuff there. And you think, okay, yeah, do you know what? Let me go with 300. You know that you've never accepted 300 before in your life. And you can't necessarily, not, I wouldn't say be bothered, but you don't have it in you to negotiate, wait, or just say, no, I'm not interested. So you take it on. It's a 6-month contract. You're working really hard. You're doing all this stuff, etc., etc. 3 months later, another project manager comes into play because they need to be part of, let's say, a working group, part of that transformation too. And you get Brady with this person and all this kind of stuff there. 2 months into their contract, you start talking about rates. And, they openly tell you that they're getting £550 a day. And your energy just drops. You're like, what? I'm on 300 and I've been doing more than this person. And you'll think to yourself, 350? And then they ask you that question. What are you going to do? You're going to have a conversation. Well, you may not have a conversation. Some people may tell the truth. Some people may lie. And some people may act like they never heard the question. There's something in my ear, you know? So like, it's not for those moments. It's not for those moments. I'm going to come back to why it's important to charge at least what the market typically charges, because there's typically a range. Okay, and I've spoken about this before. So you have to think to yourself, like, is it a confidence thing? How do you get into a point where you say no? And you have to trust in the market, okay, that there are more opportunities. How do you develop that trust? You develop that trust through scouring the market and understanding what's available. I've said this before. Use something like JobServe. Use something like CV Library. Look at every single role under the different type of roles you could search for your specific niche, and see how many there are, how long they've been created, all of that kind of stuff there. You could probably get AI to help you these days and all that kind of stuff there. I'll probably try and find a video, or try and create a video, should I say, in relation to how you can do that. So yeah, give me some time. Anyway, so check the whole market just to understand what's out there and see what rates they're charging. Okay, get a good idea. Even if, let's say for example, they're pro rata roles, they're permanent roles, 9 to 5s, whatever it may be, times that by 1.2 and then turn that into a day rate and see what happens, or by 1.5 and see what happens, depending on what it is. Okay, so think about all of that stuff. You don't want to have a scarcity mindset when it comes to stuff. But if you know the market is saying that actually there's not many roles, that's different. So remember, there's the public market and there's the shadow market. The shadow market is basically based on conversations with recruiters, agents, economic buyers, hiring managers, all of those individuals. That's where you truly and really get these roles. Of course, I do say go onto something like JobServe or CV Library, whatever it may be, and essentially have a sterling CV or supporting statements so that you get individuals come back to you anyway. This is why I have that whole PAR model, problem, action, result, because it starts those conversations. This is where people start to notice you. Okay, this is where you get the random emails and the calls and all that kind of stuff there. They don't do it as much these days, at least for me anyway, but maybe because I'm not as active because I'm in something and I haven't sort of like kickstarted my pipeline again. So point being made is that you have to understand the market when it comes to the public sort of like market and the shadow market as well. Okay. So the thing is, when it comes to day rates, it's combinational, because some people may say, okay, day rates are heavily based on, you know, someone's experience and expertise and skills and competencies and all that kind of stuff there. Yeah, there's truth to that, 100%. But how do these people know this beforehand? Well, there's a number of ways. How your CV is written, okay? Your CV will determine whether they feel that you are the right sort of person who can command certain rates. A second way they would know is through some sort of proposal or supporting statement. And so this proposal, the way it's written, the formatting, the style, how it communicates your value, there's certain deliverables that you believe that you can actually achieve based on what you've been told about the role. Okay, so there's that as well. I'm also going to say it's based on biases, whether people want to admit this or not, whether people are conscious of this or not. Demographics are key. Your experience are key. Where you've been, who you've spoken to, the projects that you've done before. All of this comes into play. It does. And so it's about presentation, your brand, and how you portray yourself, how you articulate yourself. Because if you articulate yourself in the right way that is genuine and authentic, but also commands a certain level of experience through what you say, then yes, there are certain rates that come through. But then the fourth thing I'll say is sometimes none of that matters. None of it matters. You could be the creme de la creme. You could be slick, ready to go X, Y, and Z. But if you haven't prepared yourself for that conversation when it comes to the negotiations or the rates and contracts and all this kind of stuff there, it could be a long day. Because they may just be thinking, and 9 times out of 10 they are thinking like this, how can I get this value for the lowest amount of money? Not recognizing that you may not get a motivated consultant or contractor. It's a tricky one, because these economic buyers need to think about how they spend their budgets and resourcing X, Y, and Z. But in the same vein, if they lowball the rates too low, you're gonna have, I don't know, A class or B class sort of like players who aren't motivated to hang on and stay on, or you may not have the resources to support what they're doing, or whatever it may be. So the point being made is that you have to come in with a bit of a strategy, and that strategy is dependent upon what your range is. Always ask them what the budget is. What is your budget for this role? They have to lead with that. Because if you lead, they can say no. You want to be the one to say no if it comes to that. Okay? Because if you know what their budget is, and you could do the costings in your head, and you can ask them the right sort of questions, then you're in a better position to basically say, no, that doesn't really fit my criteria. This is what I'm producing. You may even want to give them sort of like 3 different options. So if you're outside of IR35, you could give them a core or essentials option. You can give them a slightly higher upgrade, and you can give them another option as well, depending on what they want. Costing it based on value. If they want to see the day rate, fair enough, because not everything's going to be based on day rate. It all depends on how you've come in. So really think about like how you sort of like position yourself, how you negotiate things and all of that kind of stuff there. But the other thing I wanted to highlight is that the reason why it's important not to charge low is because you are freelance. You are a contractor. You are self-employed. You are a consultant. So because of that fact, you can't be in a position where you're just taking anything. I get it if the market is different for your specific niche, because every niche and market or industry, should we say, or vertical, will be slightly different. So this is why you have to do your due diligence. Don't just assume it, know it. But I say this to say that you've got bills to pay. You don't get maternity pay, you don't get paternity pay, you don't get sick leave. You may get some benefits if you're inside of IR35 and all that kind of stuff there. You may get other certain perks and pension, all that kind of stuff there. But 9 times out of 10, you need to get that stuff yourself. You need to have your own self-invested private pension, or at least some sort of investment into an index fund or stocks and shares sort of like setup. When it comes to insurance, you need to have your own insurance, whether you're inside or outside of IR35 as a contractor or consultant. So this is looking at making sure you have IR35 protection, you have professional indemnity or public liability insurance. Like, you have to pay for all of this stuff. You have to pay for accounting or accountants. So you've got all these payments to set yourself up. I know people talk about tax. Oh yeah, they're saving on. Fam, we're contributing to the system, you know. Contributing in a big way. Like, just because you are making more doesn't mean you are necessarily rid or free of taxes. Of course not. You're part of this UK system, or whatever system you're part of in terms of your country. So yes, the earning potential is more, much more, but if you're sensible with your rates, yes, you can make 6 figures as a consultant, but that depends on your rates. That depends on who you're working for. That depends on how much you're willing to take on. So there's even the mental health aspect of things. If you're taking on a really big project, maybe there is low resource, maybe there's just a lot to do, maybe it's really demanding, maybe because you know this is going to look great for your portfolio, you want to go in with this. Who is protecting that? You are. So there's a boundary thing that you need to get sorted from the beginning when it comes to rates. This is why it's really important. I'm saying this from experience. Like, I'm lucky enough to have been told what I may or should be looking for based on experience. My good friend Katrina, she told me those different things. Of course, I took that on board. I asked other people as well what they expected to get, and I also checked the market. I was like a madman. I checked for anything around program management, project management, change management, transformation, innovation, all of that stuff. And I was like, okay, these are what the rates are looking like. I was the workforce lead for a team within UK HSA, UK Health Security Agency, part of Department of Health and Social Care. And I was lucky enough to be exposed to what firm consultants are getting on a day rate, Obviously, they don't all get that day rate. It goes to the firm consultancy, and then they sort of use it for training and infrastructure and all that kind of stuff there. But obviously, some of the partners get that day rate. And then I was also able to see what inside of IR35 contractors get, outside of IR35 contractors get, what is deemed acceptable by the public sector, so to speak. So I've seen those. I know what the rates look like. So I'm saying this from solid experience. This is not me just whatever. I'm not just chatting whatever. You know, and obviously conversations with agents and recruiters are all part of this as well. So again, I want to come back to this because I have a friend, a really close friend of mine. We met during the beginning years of my contract. We started contracting around the same time, but we didn't know we started around the same time. And they were going through a very difficult time, you know, and I felt a lot of compassion for that person. And essentially, because they're going through a difficult time, they thought it'd be best to go for a lower ranking role and get paid less than what they were worth, and just kind of like just go in the background. That did not happen. They were under high stress. There was a lot of demands on them. They were doing late crazy nights and all this kind of stuff. This is as a contractor. And they came to the conclusion that it's not worth it. They were never going to do this again. Never. So you can think like that, but you're taking a gamble because you don't even know what the culture of the end client is like. Okay, so you have to have boundaries, you have to protect yourself, and higher rates make you more ambitious, more creative, more innovative, more problem. So like, it's funny what the money can do. Money doesn't solve everything, of course, but there has to be a certain range. So no one's telling you to charge £1,000 per day when really you know your rate is between, let's say for example, 550 and 750. Maybe you're just being cheeky. So this is why you need to have some sort of like understanding, okay? So you have to remember, treat yourself like a business, treat yourself like somebody who has an operation of value, and you're more likely going to be in a better position, okay? It's really, really important. But I think the key thing is to be clear about what you provide in terms of benefits. This is why PAR is important. Problem, action, result. Problem, action, result. Problem, action, result. What problems have you solved? Does it align with the problems of the organization that you're going to help potentially? What actions did you take? Does it align with a certain methodology and a rhythm that is recognizable globally for that type of sort of like organization? And what results did you get? Were they tangible? Were there percentage changes? Were there money changes? Do you make savings? Were there efficiencies? Were there increased customer experience? These are all things to talk about. It needs to roll off your tongue. You need to be confident in saying what you're saying. So hopefully that's given you some strong ideas. Again, if you want to connect with me, then make sure to get to me on all my socials, LinkedIn, Instagram, all that kind of stuff there. I'm a bit more on LinkedIn. However, I'm not going to lie, my inbox is kind of full. So I'm back and forth. But if you want stuff in your inbox that relates to this sort of stuff, okay, consulting, contracting, portfolio careers, all of that kind of jazz, then make sure to subscribe to my newsletter where I talk about this stuff regularly, and you get some sort of newsletter in your inbox at 2 p.m. every Sunday. Again, if you want to see more videos centered around portfolio careers, contracting, consulting, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.